Hi grade 12s, it's me, your teacher, and today we are going to be discussing the rising tensions between the superpowers due to the Cuban Missile Crisis. But before I do that, let's slide to the spot and look at what we did last time. The last time I saw you, we spoke about the relationship between Cuba and the USA before 1959. We explained that before 1959, there were pro-American leaders such as Batista, who allowed the USA to establish businesses in Cuba and trade with Cuba. This led to a wide gap between rich and poor Cubans and basically led to the Cuban Revolution, where Batista was ousted and replaced with Fidel Castro. So after 1959, Fidel Castro takes over and adopts many anti-American ideas. In response, the USA refuses to trade with Cuba in hopes that this would cause Castro to basically loosen up on his ideas, his communist ideas, and return to America. It has the opposite effect, and it leads to the Soviet Union actually agreeing to assist Cuba where the USA will not help them. In exchange, the Cubans allowed the USSR to establish missile bases in Cuba. We also spoke about how the crisis began with the Bay of Pigs invasion. The Bay of Pigs was basically just an area off the coast of Cuba where the USA sent a group of exiles, about 14,000 of them, to attack Cuba in hopes that they can kill Castro and basically put their own guy back in charge so that Cuba can become a capitalist country again. Unfortunately, this attack was a massive failure and a massive embarrassment to the USA. And as a result, it basically leads to the impetus that led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. The reason I say this is because of the Bay of Pigs invasion, Castro officially declares Cuba a communist state. And he starts asking the USSR to provide weapons in order to defend Cuba against a possible American attack. The Bay of Pigs basically makes Castro very paranoid that because America has attacked him once, they will do it again. And that is why he goes to the Soviet Union for help. Khrushchev agrees to help him, but that agreement comes with terms and conditions. He's hoping to turn Cuba into a Soviet missile base. So at this point, the USA is very, very scared of this close relationship between Cuba and the USA. And Kennedy warns the USSR. Please keep in mind that no missiles have been sent there yet, but he warns them not to put nuclear missiles in Cuba. And you know, when someone tells you one thing, you just gotta do the opposite. So today we're going to be talking about the increasing superpower tension between 1961 and 1962. So basically before this, there was something called the Berlin Crisis, which I will not get into because it's not important for you to know, but it was one of those little proxy wars that I told you about, where capitalism on the one side, communism on the one side, each one trying to outdo the other, which led to an increase in tension, as well as the building of the Berlin Wall, which was actually a physical manifestation of the divide between capitalism and communism. So you had West Berlin on the one side that was capitalist, and then they built this wall between West Berlin and East Berlin, which was the communist side. Now, an important thing to note is this word over here, tensions. Many people are unaware of tensions and how it relates to the superpowers. So let's just break down this word tension and see what it means. So many of you will be familiar with the game of arm wrestling. Now, in arm wrestling, the whole way that you win is that you need to put in all your strength. So you and your opponent clasps your hands together, and each person puts in 100% of their strength trying to push the other one down. Now, at the point where your strength is equal, you'll notice that the arms won't move at all. The hands won't move because you are putting in a certain amount of strength and your opponent is also putting in a certain amount of strength. The feeling that you get when that happens is called tension. Now, the Cold War had a build-up of tension between capitalism and communism. So the capitalists are trying to put down the communists, and the communists are trying to put down the capitalists. Obviously, how do you win a arm wrestling game? Is that you need to put in 110% of your strength and put the other team on the ground. And this is what each of the superpowers were trying to do during this time. So let's have a look. Why did Khrushchev send missiles to Cuba? So he was running a massive risk by sending missiles to Cuba because remember, they want to avoid all-out war. They don't want to move from a Cold War to a hot war, because it would lead to mutually assured destruction. So why would Khrushchev take that risk? He believed that by putting the missiles in Cuba, they would be in place before the USA would discover them. And if the USA did discover them, there wasn't much they could do about it. So there's 4 reasons that I have outlined here for you. There are a few others, but I'm just going to focus on the 4. I would advise you to know at least 2 of them off by heart. So the first reason is that Khrushchev may have sent the missiles to Cuba to defend Cuba following the Bay of Pigs operation. So you remember, this is the whole reason that Castro turned to Khrushchev in the first place. He was scared that the USA was going to attack them again, which is why he asked the Soviet Union for help. Cuba is a relatively small country compared to these massive superpowers of the Soviet Union and the USA. They don't have the military capability to fight back against America if America were to attack them full force. So the Soviet Union does have that ability. So if you have a big friend in your corner, you can be safe. So one of the reasons that Khrushchev put the missiles, it may have been completely innocent. It may have just been to defend Cuba following the Bay of Pigs operation. Secondly, they may have put the missiles in Cuba to force the USA to bargain to remove their missiles from Turkey. Now, you will remember at the beginning of this unit, I told you that the Western powers were basically focusing a lot of their attention in Europe, and the USA actually put missile bases in countries like Turkey and Italy pointed at the Soviet Union. This was very scary to Khrushchev because it's essentially like having a gun against your head at all times. So he couldn't really do what he wanted to because he was afraid if he were to attack the USA or to attack one of the USA's allies, they would simply launch their missiles from Turkey and the Soviet Union wouldn't have a lot of time to respond to that. So one of the reasons he may have put the missiles in Cuba is basically to have a bargaining chip. So, for example, to say, okay, you can remove your missiles from Turkey and we'll remove our missiles from Cuba. Another reason why Khrushchev decided to send missiles to Cuba may have been to catch up with the USA in terms of the arms race by placing missiles as close to the USA as possible. So one of the problems that the Soviet Union actually had was, even though they had more nuclear missiles than the USA, they were just too far away. So if they were to launch a nuclear missile, it would take far too long for this missile to actually reach the USA. And in that time, the USA would actually have plenty of time to prepare for the attack and also to launch a counterattack. Whereas if there was a missile that was close to the USA would only have 15 minutes basically to respond before that missile was attacking or hitting their country, which is a very, very short period of time. So that may have been one of the reasons to catch up with the USA in the arms race by placing missiles as close to the USA as possible. Lastly, they wanted to perhaps show Soviet strength. show off, hey, look what we can do. Can you do this? We are powerful. You can't mess with us. And basically force Kennedy to back down. So this is the increasing superpower tension that was basically caused by the Cuban Missile Crisis. My advice to you is to know at least 2 of the 4 reasons. If you know all 4, that is amazing and brilliant, and you'll do very well in the exam. So over here we have a picture of important people in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now usually what would happen if I saw you face to face is I'd be sitting here with my Sharpie or my whiteboard markers, and I'll actually ask you guys, what do you see? But I can't do that because it is a video, unfortunately. So let me see if I can do something like this. Oopsie, apologies. Let me just fiddle a bit and see if I can do what I want to do. Okay, unfortunately I did play around with it. It's not letting me do what I want to do, which was basically just to add little notes and stuff next to the images that you see here. So you can have a look here. There are 2 characters here. Let me give you a few moments just to guess who they may be. Just a couple of seconds. Bing, 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 bing. Time up. So this bald guy over here, he is Nikita Khrushchev. If you guessed Nikita Khrushchev, you guessed correctly. Well done. This guy over here is President John F. Kennedy. If you guessed that, well done. Then you'll have a look that they are both sitting at a table. They both have their fingers basically hovering over a little button. Do you see that? And then over here, do you see that there? You can see that they are busy arm wrestling. What do you think that arm wrestle might represent? Let me give you a couple of seconds to think about it. Bing, 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 bing. If you guessed the increasing superpower tension, you would be 100% correct. Because remember, I told you when you put in all of your strength, you're going to get to a part in the arm wrestling where the hands are not moving, which is the tension. So if you have a look over here, you can see that they are both sitting on something. Let me give you a few seconds to think what these things could be. Bing, 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 bing. If you guessed nuclear missiles or hydrogen bombs or missiles, you are on 100% the right track. You'll notice that this one belongs to the USA and this one belongs to the USSR, and both of these people have their fingers hovering over the trigger, so to speak. So what does this mean? What is the message of this cartoon? By the way, that is a question that they love to ask in the exam, so it is something that you do need to know. So we've identified the 2 characters. Oh, there's one more thing that I forgot to mention. Who do you think looks more freaked out? Did you guess? Khrushchev. So what kind of things gives away the fact that Khrushchev looks more freaked out? You can see there's a bit more sweat dripping off his face. Now I don't have a caption here, but if I did, it would tell you that this image is actually an American cartoon. So you can see that the bias is there. Kennedy is portrayed as cool and calm, and Khrushchev is portrayed as freaking out. So the message of this cartoon is basically that Kennedy and Khrushchev both have the same amount of power in their hands, and that there's a lot of tension between the USSR and the USA, because either one can destroy the other simply by pressing that little button. So I'm going to stop the lesson there. I hope this was helpful. The next time I see you, we will talk about how the Cuban Missile Crisis unfolded in the year 1962. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your day. Sayonara.